Welcome to Cyber Leaders with me, Ciaran Martin.
And me, James Lyne. Now, we're both from the SANS Institute who are kindly backing this podcast. I myself am a massive geek and I've spent my life chasing cyber criminals around the internet.
I'm not a techie. People are giving me grief for saying that, but I'm unapologetic. I dealt with cybersecurity policy and operations in government and set up the UK's National Cybersecurity Centre. And together, James and I are trying to unpack the weird, wacky and wireless, promised you an extra W, so what's the other one? Weird, wacky, wireless and wired world of tech security and all the complicated things that it involves.
I think the challenge is to make that a longer and longer acronym every time we do an episode, Ciaran. It'll be 17 in no time. But hey, folks, look, this podcast is a voice for security leaders. We want CISOs, security directors, and everyone beyond to build up their knowledge of what works, what doesn't, and ultimately to secure your organizations more comprehensively and quickly.
Preach.
Right, well, Ciaran, we have an important discussion today.
All of our discussions are important, James. My season 2 songs are particularly important. They're of seismic importance.
Yeah, that's probably what I would define as profoundly and objectively, maybe even categorically untrue, Ciaran.
Oh, okay.
Especially the terrible songs. But love your enthusiasm, and I appreciate your valiant attempts to rescue our reputation with that.
Love your enthusiasm. Sounds like my annual appraisal. Anyway, but what is important about today's discussion?
Well, we've got a clear stance on this podcast, don't we? That we don't do hype.
Nope, we don't.
We don't do FUD.
Nope.
We do real.
Yes.
So we've not gone mad on scaring people, at least not for illegitimate reasons. But there's one big issue that so many have been concerned about. Everyone's kind of written us comments saying you've got to cover it, and that is AI. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, etc. The big, huge set of new technologies driving our world.
Yeah, fair enough. You're absolutely right. Indeed. It is time for AI.
It's probably even slightly past the time for AI, but at least it gives us more stuff to talk about. So look, much as sometimes people at conferences these days measure how long proceedings take before AI is mentioned, a kind of new version of Godwin's law, I suppose, we've somehow managed to do 20 or so episodes of this podcast before doing an episode specifically on AI, which is actually completely crazy, I think, Ciaran. But yes, it's time.
Fair enough. But look, like everybody else, we're under budget pressure, so I've got an idea.
So, yes.
So I'm just going to ask ChatGPT, is AI a force for good or bad in cybersecurity? Okay, bear with me. This should answer it. We should get our cheapest podcast ever.
A little skeptical on this, Ciaran, but let's see where it goes.
Right. I have an answer. AI in cybersecurity can be both a force for good and bad, depending on how it's used. Oh, for goodness sake, right? That's about as much use as some of those intelligence assessments I used to get in government.
Stunningly enlightening.
Exactly. So intelligence assessments in government used to say things like, on the one hand, World War III might break out. On the other hand, it might not. So brilliantly useful.
The risk is truly binary. It's 1 or 0. We may or may not be totally screwed. Well, look, Ciaran, as always, it falls to me to rescue the situation, I think.
I'm afraid so. I am now so humiliated. I will have to cede the leadership of this podcast to you following my failed attempt to use ChatGPT. So it does indeed fall to you. Come up with a better plan to explain the implications of AI for cybersecurity.
Fear not, I have a plan. It's an old-fashioned plan. It's not particularly AI-based at the moment, but it's actually a human being, an expert. And what's more, one of our own SANS as well. He's probably furiously using ChatGPT as we speak to figure out what to say about it.
Well, come on, don't spoil it. Don't spoil it.
Does that sound a bit better, Ciaran?
It does sound much better, so tell me more.
Okay, how about a founding member of the first branch of US military focused on information operations?
Sounds good.
A former member of the US Air Force Office of Special Investigations, cool acronym, where he led a team conducting computer crime investigations, incident response, and computer forensics.
Getting even better.
A former director of Mandiant, one of the great pioneering cybersecurity companies, and an entrepreneur too, with over 20 years experience in all the major areas of our industry.
We have a human outperforming ChatGPT already. I'm sold. Go on.
Rumor has it when ChatGPT runs out of answers, it goes to this human to provide the background. Okay, maybe I made that one up, but he's a SANS legend of many years standing. It's our very own chief of research and head of faculty, Rob Lee.
Brilliant. Hooray. Welcome, Rob. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks, everyone. I'm super excited to be here. And I definitely was a part of the pining cybersecurity company, Mandiant.
The pining, yes. Well, all cybersecurity companies are pining at some point.
See, we'd have fixed that in edit using some careful AI, but Rob screwed us now. I'm going to have to leave that mistake in.
We're definitely keeping that in.
100%.
Well, we've picked on poor old ChatGPT. That is a mistake worthy of any large language model. But look, James has, despite screwing that up, he saved the podcast from my AI-generated slop. So I'll try and ruin it again. We're going to get on to our core and vital topic of AI and cybersecurity, which you're specializing in right now. But that's not always been your specialism because you've been around a long time. So tell us a little bit, as we do with all our guests, about your own cybersecurity journey, how you ended up as Chief of Research and Head of Faculty at SANS, and how you've come to specialize in AI.
So in a nutshell, I worked, as you mentioned, in cyber defense operations almost 20 years ago. I moved over to the Air Force Office of Special Investigations doing national level intrusion investigations. And that was against some of the first APTs, the Russians and Chinese in the late 90s, early 2000s. Was then moved to an operational offensive unit that supported pretty much every agency around the Washington, D.C. space. And that was entirely interesting because at that point, every operations that we're a part of had to be signed off by the president. And finally, I shifted over to Mandiant for the next 5 years, helping author the first M-Trends reports on APT, which at that point, every single time we talked about it, everyone came up to me afterwards and said, hey, are you able to talk about classified information? And we just responded to incidents at pharmaceutical companies and so forth that were dealing with the Chinese. Early 2000s, Stephen Worthfett brought me on SANS doing talks. And as you guys know, all the instructors at SANS basically are practitioners. And I developed two of our leading courses, 508 on Advanced Incident Response and Windows Forensics 500. And essentially been running around SANS for almost 25 years and a full-time executive for the past 4.
Brilliant. Well, thank you. And you were able to divulge classified information and you didn't have people pining for it. So there you go. James, where are we going to go next?
Well, I've got lots of questions I want to ask Rob about his initial foray into AI and how he copes with what I seem to feel, even though I spend lots of time playing with AI, that the challenge of AI imposter syndrome, given its velocity of movement. But let's get there later. Rob, my turn to try and ruin the episode, I think. So I'm going to start with the obvious question. But, we've got to ask it, and everyone wants to know, will AI kill us all? And if so, when? And if you know, maybe even how.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yes, it will. You heard it here first.
I mean, we could have the entire episode talk specifically about when the Terminators are going to go active. But in all honesty, I think the biggest concern for a lot of the folks listening to this podcast is that AI is permeating business operations and transforming every single organization out there. And a lot of those security leaders are being asked specifically, how can we lean forward as a business and do that securely? And I think to a certain extent, that leads into, on one side is the Terminator going to be taking over my company. And the other side is how do we potentially use AI to stay relatively competitive, even becoming a leader in the field? This is a hard debate for CISOs and executives of any organization to deal with, especially regarding AI right now.
So let me jump in there and just ask, being the non-technical person, I just wanted to ask you for a little bit of a technical analysis about where AI is going. It's such a huge term. You think back to 30 years ago when the internet was going to change everything, and it changed lots of things, but we're still not in flying cars. We can send much faster videos and communicate much more quickly. AI caught the public and commercial world's attention through large language models. It seems to be going deeper and deeper into that. But there are other things about robotics and so forth that people might have heard about but don't really see in their everyday lives. So for you, differentiate, if you can, Rob, the hype from the reality. Where's this really making a powerful difference? Where is it perhaps making less of a difference? What is AI to you and the modern worker?
Oh my goodness. Again, such a great question. It really comes down to that AI in particular. And, just to level set here, I don't think anyone out there is an AI expert yet, except those engineers that are trying to be siphoned off from Google to Meta right now. What is it, 7-figure salaries they're offering? But in reality, what ends up happening in particular with AI in comparison to when, the internet was rolling out over almost a decade of time from the early 90s until it really became a part of every business operation in the late 90s into the early 2000s. Basically, we're on a much more diminished time schedule in which new releases are occurring so fast in capabilities that a lot of organizations are having a struggle keeping up with the latest iterations. It was only 2 years ago, well, I guess 2.5 years ago, OpenAI's initial ChatGPT was released and people started prompting and becoming very skeptical of it because it was just basically like a really enhanced Google. To where things are today, people could do McKinsey level research studies using deep research within about 10 to 15 minutes that could help change and have your own little research co-pilot helping you make decisions on a daily basis. This is phenomenal how fast things are occurring. I'm kind of curious, do you feel it's a speed thing or, how do you guys feel about that expertise in general with what I'm saying? Do you feel there are any real experts?
Oh, yeah, no, I love what you said, Rob. Look, I think if you believe LinkedIn, there's a lot of people with deep AI expertise that precedes its invention by about 50 years. But you're right, the industry around the stuff is still forming and it's moving so fast. I mean, I spend a lot of time on technology, playing with things, kind of researching latest threats. I am definitely not a Luddite, 19th century textile worker per the original definition. And yet, when you mentioned the deep research stuff, it's fascinating. When that first came out, it was transformative to the utility of AI to my work. And it was just this kind of game changer of my perception of AI. Yet, if you missed that announcement or didn't find that tiny button, you'd have a very outdated model of its capabilities. So I mentioned it earlier. We may as well go there now. I feel a bit of a constant imposter with AI just because it's moving so quickly. And I'm actually trying. But you spend more time on the stuff again. Do you get AI imposter syndrome? Do you manage to stay on top of it? Any pro tips for people who are trying to do the same before we get back to the main script?
Great question. Don't worry about the main script. It's a great question. Let's go there.
It is a consistent struggle on a daily basis. There's so many things. It's almost hyperbole, but it's actually truth. On a daily basis, there are so many announcements, so many newsworthy things, so many new capabilities that are coming out. And it's hard to just keep up to date with the industry, much less harder to keep up to date with the AI's influence on cybersecurity. I almost take AI learning like I do my workouts. You at least have to dedicate 30 minutes a day, maybe a little bit more time on the weekends, just to get in this bucket that says, hey, I'm holding on to the fast-moving car, much less driving it at this point.
Can I just butt in here and take us completely off script?
Even more.
And we will get back to AI and cybersecurity at some point. But I just think this is really interesting. And this is somebody who not just suffers from, but embraces imposter syndrome across tech as a whole, never mind AI. So I'm shameless about it. But so I think what you mentioned about McKinsey level research is absolutely fascinating because it shows you AI has taken this chunk of work, research, analysis, content generation, and it's gone so deep so quickly that it's hugely affecting entire professions. You see now there's been reports recently in Britain about those sorts of professional services firms absolutely taking a scythe to their graduate level intakes because they're getting AI to do it all, right? But that, in some respects, it's a big economic upheaval, but it's quite narrow in terms of the overall human experience. You then move out into the physical world, and I've got colleagues here at the University of Oxford, and they say, look, this is absolutely happening, and it's really, really moving fast. But if you take, for example, when AI interacts with the physical world, I've got a great colleague, Professor Mike Wooldridge, who applies what he calls the plumbing test. Could an AI robot do a plumbing task? And he says it's actually really disappointing compared to where you might have thought it might have been 5 years ago. So are we in this sort of multi-speed AI where some of it is just going at rocket speed and completely transforming bits of the economy in ways that are actually quite significant for cybersecurity because it's all about how you use digital equipment, but actually in terms of our everyday life in the physical world, it's not quite there yet. Is that a plausible theory or am I the ultimate imposter?
Oh no, you're spot on. I mean, the hard part is there's a release the past few weeks and you end up taking a look at, there's all these studies going out there. Can AI specifically be used to make executive level decisions? Can AI specifically be used to create content? There have been a lot of pushback. You mentioned human versus AI generated. And here's the thing, at least from what I've been able to tell, there's a large rejection of just pure AI generated content, even if it's accurate. There's AI slop on one side and AI, hey, it's pretty accurate, but people still want the human interaction. Now, I say this at the same time that there are some social media folks that are out there that are generating pure AI content on an hourly basis. And then some of these social media hits on TikTok and whatnot are getting millions of views. But at the same time, what is happening, and you're hearing the reverberations on Reddit and everything else, that people still want that human that's driving it. And so I think there's this convergence of fascination on one end. Hey, that used to take me hours to do, even a week to do, and now it's taking seconds. There may be this convergence to say, what exactly do we need humans to generate? And what exactly are we okay with AI assisting humans to generate? I think that is the debate right now. And it's going to permeate over into cybersecurity too. Do you trust organizational decisions to be able to allow cybersecurity to block or to potentially cut off parts of your network because it thinks it's infected? Or is a human still going to be needed to be able to impact the velocity of the adversaries that are moving through your network? I think the human involvement or quotient of AI is going to be debated for quite some time.
Well, that's brilliant, Rob. Thank you for my free tutorial on this.
Human in the loop.
But I believe we're supposed to be doing a cybersecurity podcast, so I'm going to show some discipline and fire it back to James to get us back on track.
I tried to pull it back. there.
You really did. Actually, you did a good job. That segue was almost unnecessary, but James, you go.
I love this discussion, right? Because this is one of the challenges. When you use the label AI, it encompasses so many different technologies, so many fast-moving capabilities, an entire world of different possibilities and use cases. It's hard to generalize. And I remember we talked about the cloud, and generalizing that was quite difficult when it came to security policies and making decisions. And AI takes that to kind of a whole new level. And Rob, I'm going to make a couple of statements in here that we won't try to debate because otherwise we will inadvertently turn this into a maths and science podcast, which could be a wonderful spin-off. And I will bring it back to cyber defenders in these statements. No doubt you've seen these papers over the last few weeks and months debating issues like cognitive debt. Ciaran, if you haven't seen that MIT paper, for example, there's this really interesting idea in there that if you...
I never miss them.
Oh, I know you love an MIT paper. It's almost as good as Fishing Weekly. Love a carp. But it kind of has this idea that if you shortcut to the conclusion, you shortcut to the answer, as one often does with AI, you have no idea why the answer is what it is. And therefore you have kind of weaker recall, lower context, inability to apply. So you get the answer, but you skip all of the kind of secondary effects that actually make your brain able to use that stuff. Now, there's all kinds of debates raging on whether those tests were fair, whether they just wanted to be kind of hype-mongering, hyperbole-rich folks with headlines like, your brain will rot if you use any AI. As per usual, I think the truth is more towards the middle, that blind use of AI unchecked is probably rather unwise, but it's clearly an incredibly powerful technology, probably to the scale of like when we first brought the internet in. So Rob, bringing us a little back to the cyber defense lens versus, Terminator's brain rot and the future of humanity, because I know that's a big crystal ball. The community of cyber defenders listening, as they think about AI more specifically in this space, how do you think about the risks of AI? And I know that could be a list of 100 things, but maybe pick 2 or 3 of the things you think we ought to pay the most attention to, that AI either helps, hinders, causes, or otherwise.
Oh my goodness. Well, I first think that a cognitive debate needs to be done on a beach sipping fruity drinks and debating which is worse, the fruity drinks.
The only scientifically valid way.
Fruity drinks or, using AI to potentially cause brain rot. I love that term, by the way. That MIT paper, 100%, when you end up taking a look at that, using AI to just not think for you is definitively going to create more problems. Just have AI ask the same question. AI will come out with the answer. The issue here is that AI needs to be used. And I teach my kids this a little bit. I said, don't just use AI to write something for you and to make decisions. You need to switch that and say, how can I use AI to create my creativity, to be able to teach me, to be able to level up and potentially increase speed? And I think this directly goes into point number 2, where that last point, which is how do we use AI in a cybersecurity aspect to increase your ability to make quicker decisions, increase your velocity, to teach you what you need, and to come up with creative solutions. And this goes back to that human being that I think is in that mix, is that a human being powered with AI. And again, there's a lot of analogies with that. But I truly believe that the problem-solving capabilities of individuals can now be red teamed and saying, how else can I potentially utilize my idea, my creative solution, and apply that to cybersecurity defense or offense in a new and clever way I had not thought of. Use it as a co-pilot to challenge you, to make you better. And I think that is essential to the way cybersecurity is leaning in and how the human and this new technology can be used to increase the speed of your defenses.
I love this, using AI antagonistically and looking at the counter cases. I have to say that's one of the things I've started doing incredibly regularly that I didn't do when I started. And it's so powerful to enhancing my own thinking versus AI, doing the work. I know I need to let Ciaran back in here because he's got a million questions. He's getting free education and consulting on this podcast. But I will say I did in the background quickly ask ChatGPT, and it did confirm that providing you're willing to accept sunburn and sand as variables in the task here, there may be some argument that an environment for meta-reflection, cocktails and ocean breezes, could be useful for recognizing patterns of degenerative content with iconic clarity. And then it, finished stating that a dark room with 3 monitors and a lot of coffee, like I'm presently sat in, might be more ideal. So I like where ChatGPT is going with this. But let's start at the beach, shall we, Rob?
Notice it wasn't ChatGPT that came up with the beach and fruity drinks. That still took a human.
That was a human.
To originate that idea.
It just doubled down on it and gave me a great argument on why I need to be able to expense a beach holiday.
Well, as you say, I'm going to cut back in here, and I'm going to cut back in with an observation, which is classic in terms of this podcast, which is that twice now, Rob has valiantly turned it back from general musings and education about the future strategic trends of the most important technology of our lifetime into the core business of AI and cybersecurity. And we're supposed to do that, James. We're not supposed to rely on the guest to correct our flights of fancy. But
I just like to think of myself as the next Nietzsche, I'm
now going to take a vow that for the rest of this episode, I'm just going to ask you questions about AI and cybersecurity.
I'm in.
And I'm going to do it in my normal, very simplistic way. We've got AI for good in cybersecurity and AI for bad. So let me just ask you a bit about AI for bad first, Rob. And just about almost what you've observed. I mean, as far as I know, and this is one of those time-sensitive risks about the gap between when we record this and when it goes out, because who knows what will happen in the intervening days. But there's been no, to my knowledge, observable AI cyber catastrophe. AI is not entirely new. We've been talking about it in mainstream discourse for a few years. Businesses are using it. And there's been a lot of concern expressed about, baddies, malevolent hackers using AI for bad. Are you surprised that there hasn't been a bigger disaster? Are we just not noticing things? How would you assess the extent to which malevolent actors are using AI to date?
Supply chain attacks surged to 245% from 2023 to 2024. And breaches like the Oracle Cloud breach, GitHub Action supply chain compromise, and vulnerabilities such as Log4j have proven just how one compromised supplier can disrupt thousands of organizations. Whether you're looking for comprehensive training, expert-led webcast, or ready-to-use templates and frameworks, the new SANS Supply Chain Security Hub has everything you need to secure your supply chain, from development to deployment. Explore our resources at sans.org/supplychain.
Oh, great question. I'll go back to what we know at this point. We know Iranian threat actors, for example, are using AI. And by the way, just really big hat tip to those over at Google and using Gemini and even OpenAI that they've detected it and booted these threat actors from their systems.
Absolutely, yeah.
But Iranians in particular, Scattered Spider is another one. So APT42 and Scattered Spider are really good examples. They're using AI to mass produce phishing capabilities. Scattered Spider is utilizing it for SMS phishing attacks, around MFA. And these are things that are facts, because what both Google and OpenAI have come out with is saying, here's what they're doing. Here's what they're utilizing for, not only research, but mass scale phishing creation capability. So that answers your first question. What do we know it's being used for today?
So, and well, just on that, and Scattered Spider have become, sadly, very well known in the UK, where James and I are as a result of major retail hacks. And I suppose just to pick up on something James asked earlier, you've mentioned sort of advanced phishing and advanced social engineering. Anything else that you're beginning to see, or even to go beyond just what you've seen, anything else that your professional expertise thinks, really should be on the minds of the cyber defense community?
Yeah, it's what we can't see is utilizing AI, in particular in, I hate the term agentic, but reasoning-based decision-making to be able to multi-layer tools. Even just 8 tools in an arsenal is all that is needed to potentially plow through a network at speeds and velocity no one has ever seen before. We're starting to see full-scale CTFs that are being won by AI, very similar to the chess matches and supercomputers of many years ago. It is this ability to create capabilities with reasoning that will allow not only that phishing attempt come in at mass scale, then they're going to be able to get to administrator level access, to pivot across the network, to be able to implant themselves in speeds that used to take weeks. And based on our MIT research paper that's out there, they've been able to show that adversaries can move through a network 47 times faster than human being able to do the same thing. And that speed takes it, if you just say, okay, that used to take a week to do, now we're down to about 8 minutes of time from that initial infection to where they're implanted on your network.
A terrifying statistic and an important one, because it's funny, isn't it, Rob? Whenever we start kind of talking about adversarial use of AI, we instantly all get to phishing because it's such an obvious example. It's actually happening in the wild. It's like, oh, yeah, phishing. That makes sense. I can see why that's useful. And then a lot of the modeling on how AI could be transformative to, this kind of adversarial operations peters off. But that environment mapping, that automated kind of exfiltration, kind of decision-making that leads to faster breaches, that's much scarier stuff than just phishing alone. I'm curious, Rob, I know we're going to twist back to positive because I know you've got lots of ways that AI can be used for good. And frankly, it's a bit of a pattern, isn't it? Often with new technologies, it's a bit more useful and offensive until the defensive side kind of builds up capabilities because it requires a bit more structure and a bit more work. So it's not uncommon to be where we are, but you've got to have I wonder if that will happen kind of worry scenario on the adversarial side. I'm not going to hold you to it.
He is, you know that, don't you?
And I know you're not going to say, World War III.
He's absolutely going to hold you to it.
I am going to. Don't tell him, Ciaran.
To be fair, we are recording, but...
AI shall note the exact moment of the question for generations to come. But I'm curious, you think beyond the present capabilities, you think through the next few years, is there something that you think AI might enable on the adversarial side that's scarier? Or is it just more of the same stuff done faster at lower cost, which is in of itself quite scary?
You're asking me what keeps me up at night, and this is no joke. This stuff keeps me up at night. Okay, so here's the one example. We're going to see ransomware attacks just take off, mostly because of the fact that when we end up really taking a look at how easy it is to phish and how fast they're going to be able to move through a network, logarithmic ransomware is going to happen. Now, secondly, this is the thing that truly keeps me up at night. James, you and I, Ciaran, we're very much aware the number of people in a nation state that it takes to leverage an operational capability.
Yeah.
Hundreds of individuals.
Absolutely.
Research, operators, those who are maintaining the targets. These are things that, require a full operations center to do. With AI, just like we're seeing in the business world, where we're starting to see billion-dollar valuation companies run by one or two people, you're now going to have nation-state capabilities powered by AI in the hands of one person. And it flips that triangle that used to have up at the top, nation-state adversaries, hacktivists have the least amount of capability. What if you now have a single person that is able to leverage the capabilities of a nation-state, because it's all automated agents, to be able to attack critical infrastructure because they're really upset about something that happened to them personally, and they potentially want to take out something that we consider critical that used to take a nation-state adversary the ability to do. One person with a really big attitude problem is what keeps me up at night, because that no longer is in the hands of a nation state where a president or some sort of decision-making authority will say, let's do this operation. Now you're going to have one individual wake up in the middle of the night and say, it's time to cause some havoc.
So, we've laughed a lot during this episode, but this is actually quite a somber and difficult moment in the conversation. James said at the start that we only do well-evidenced fear-mongering. And this is a very compelling risk. As you say, we know one of the things that's sort of kept us from disaster in cyberspace in the last 30 years has been the fact that anybody can do a little bit of a hack, but to do something really bad, you need an awful lot of infrastructure and money and skilled people, and you probably don't need that anymore.
Stuxnet was purportedly expensive to develop, in theory.
Well, yeah, of course. And all the stuff that Sandworm do, the Ukraine power grid attacks take 2-3 years, et cetera, et cetera. So this is actually genuinely alarming. And as you say, someone of your expertise and experience loses sleep over it. So this is the point where we do have to pivot to some optimism or at least some agency. So tell us about using this stuff in cyber defense. What do you reckon we can do? What are the opportunities? What should people be thinking about in our profession, in companies? What should the cyber leadership community be thinking about to tackle this problem using some of these capabilities?
Oh, this is where I get totally excited.
Go on.
Okay, so
Excellent.
I'm glad you asked this question. So, okay, pause for a second. One of the biggest issues that are out there is being able to, in a lot of industries that don't have the expense to be able to hire a bunch of people to take on a lot of SOC work, for example. You're now able, in critical infrastructure, water specifically here in the United States, you can't hire enough individuals out there at the, salaries that are needed. But what if you're able to deploy defensive agentic swarms in critical infrastructure? That is now within reach. We are able to potentially have commercial companies develop agent swarms that used to be an individual. And these are kind of like that initial grunt work, analytical, take a look at what's going on in the network, deploy them everywhere across the network, and to be able to do that reasoning from a detection aspect. Think about how drones can take out a fleet in naval warfare. Think about drones and agents swarming a water infrastructure to be able to protect it from critical infrastructure attack. That is going to be a game changer for cyber defense.
Okay, and just very quickly then, that's really positive and optimistic. But in terms of, it's not just equal and opposite, you don't always defend like against like. So some of those big threats of advanced social engineering that you're talking about, are there things beyond enhanced AI capabilities that organizations should be doing, whether it's governance, risk management, different capabilities they already have, different ways of training humans? You did paint quite a very compellingly, well-evidenced, scary picture of enhanced ransomware, small groups of people doing awful things, as well as using the latest techniques. What else can people do to defend themselves against these types of threats?
Well, it goes back to the fact that we have multiple organizations have access to massive data sets. That where can we put a bunch of massive data sets to be used for threat intelligence, threat detection, automatic reasoning based off of new things that are coming in? If the velocity of the attackers are coming in, they still have to follow a specific cyber kill chain. It's not like they're Star Trek transporters beaming them into the network. They still, even though they're increasing velocity, it is still the same work that they're doing.
Got it. Okay.
It's just like farming. So what ends up happening here is, in particular, when you're talking about the way organizations should be thinking about utilizing these data sets, is looking to ways to combine data sets in their organization and outside organizations to be able to leverage that massive data set in a massive LLM that could be used for cyber defense. It opens up doors that have never been possible before.
Got it. I find that really interesting. It's kind of, the battle of the good and bad AIs, right? And it reminds me of early in my career, we saw this escalation in kind of the volume of malicious code. It went from kind of 2,000-3,000 pieces of malware a day globally to hundreds of thousands by kind of attackers using automation rigs, kind of polymorphic generators and so on. And we couldn't just rely on humans doing all the analysis and writing identities anymore. So we built what we called back then an expert system. It did a kind of regression analysis over the data set. I mean, it was machine learning. A lot of this technology isn't, new. And it will kind of spit out suggested identities and patterns and approaches. So our defense rates went up. And then the cyber criminals came along and went, look, they're auto-detecting us. So they produced rigs where they would run our products automatically and figure out when we detected them so they could move on. So now we have a set of generators on their side trying to out-generate, out-detect the set of generators on our side. And it's this kind of battle of two machine systems. What was, of course, a bit different back then was there was less adaptation, as with AI, less creativity. It was a bit more linear machine learning. But it was, the battle of machines programmed by humans. And it's kind of the same thing again. It's just that the stuff we're able to deploy for battle purposes is, dare I say, a bit more intelligent and adaptive. I know I ventured into careful ground there saying intelligent around AI. I'm about to get swamped by academics citing Apple's paper, I know. But let's just go with it, people. So, is it just goodies versus baddies? Who has more data? Is it goodies versus baddies. We've both got lots of really good data and creativity is the differentiator. I suppose what I'm getting to is who's going to win, Rob?
Right now, it's going to be the adversaries. And here's why. If you're right in the sense that both the data sets can be potentially equal, the implementations are not currently equal. Defensive folks have to use regulated, guardrailed, and security contained capabilities using their models, whether or not they like it or not, because of different regulations that are coming out for privacy related issues. The laws and legal frameworks that are going to be implemented over it will restrict the amount of data that can be used. Adversaries, on the other hand, very succinctly, unrestricted, unguardrailed LLM models that are going to be able to be used for attacks. When you end up having the ability to have unrestricted capability versus a restricted capability, accessing the same data, there's only one winner.
Well, Rob, you're dragging me into my favorite area, so I'm not really being dragged at all. We're both ex-government in different ways. So I was going to ask, in this race versus goodies and baddies, and you gave, frankly, a pretty depressing and scary answer. You said the baddies are going to win. I was looking at the screen with our brilliant producer, Holly, who just looked horrified at that answer in terms of how scary it was, and it was. So how do we change this? So you've mentioned one thing around excessively onerous, as you characterize them, data regulations. So to what extent is this about policy, and is it about liberalization of data laws, or is it about compulsion of companies to do things? Because we know from the recent history of cybersecurity, companies aren't going to take some of these steps unless you compel them. What's going to shift the dial? Because at the moment, you're predicting quite a gloomy future, but we have agency, we have choices to make. So what could shift this so that you could give a different answer, a more positive one, a more reassuring one for Holly and everybody else who's out there not specializing in cybersecurity, but wondering about whether this is going to go the right way or the wrong way?
It'll always go the right way. And, anytime they are in a situation where those criminals are doing, much easier job than we can as, police, firefighters, anything else, what will end up happening here is the regulations that are being implemented today. And this is, again, not just AI related. I have examples going back to medical, even in cybersecurity, in which the initial implementation of policy regulations are well intended. And then what will end up needing to happen here, just like in the medical field, we want to create privacy umbrellas around, MRIs and your blood samples and everything else that come in for testing. In order to get that from hospital A to hospital B, even in different countries, there's this privacy thing that says, hey, you can't transfer medical data, but now you can because it's encapsulated into different safe harbors. I believe, and I'm advocating for this, that you need to create, from a regulatory standpoint, safe harbors for cybersecurity data that are only utilized for cyber defense. Nothing commercial. It's just like medical. In the United States, it's HIPAA, for example.
Okay.
HIPAA for cybersecurity, in which what will end up happening is they will see the attackers start to leverage all this data. And then they'll say, hey, we have a lot of data too. How do we potentially create safe harbors for it? And I'm getting people to think about that today. It doesn't mean it's going to happen overnight. We need a lot of folks out there balancing both privacy and utilization of the data. And because we have access to so much data and so many individuals worldwide, on the cyber defense side, this will be figured out. There will be ways for us to share data and to be able to utilize all this data in a defensive capability. It'll just take some time.
Brilliant. Well, that's reassuring and thoughtful and realistic. So thank you for that. And then just to move back to the organizational level. So you mentioned what policymakers should be thinking about today. What should organizations be doing today to try and make themselves safer from all of this heightened threat?
Well, first of all, we need educated leaders. And just like in the late 90s, and again, this is not just on business transformation as it leads to cybersecurity. We need leaders who actually understand what the implications of this technology will mean. It is almost like leaders in the late 90s saying, hey, we're going to make strategic decisions about the internet without ever using email or a web browser. You need to touch it and work with it a little bit, even at an executive level, to be able to make strategic decisions about this. And as a result of that, you also need to have the organization figure out, how do we not just go way risk averse and saying no one touch AI? The organization needs to lean forward enough to say, hey, we're going to accelerate our utilization of AI, but we need to do so in a way that has security, thoughtful, to be able to attach the parachute and a safety harness that's going to keep the organization from leaning so far forward it's going to be falling on its face. What I'm getting at here is that cybersecurity is that harness, the risk ability for organizations to be able to feel secure in leaning forward That's where cybersecurity is going to come in and really aid organizations to be able to do this.
It makes a lot of sense, Rob. Hey, I know we're burning through time. I can feel we're going to need the sequel already, notwithstanding the fact because by the time we release this podcast, Skynet will have taken over and we'll have to say different things about it all. But Rob, we've talked about AI being used by defenders and by attackers and kind of rotting all our brains and so on. There is a specific, arguably tactical, but very important part to this. There have been a lot of studies kind of demonstrating security deficiencies in AI models, in AI deployment in organizations, in many cases, quite basic security failures where folks have kind of excitedly rushed to deploy this stuff and left themselves open. So I want to talk for just a moment about deploying and using AI and how to secure it. And I'm going to preface this with I'm going to demand, you can blame me, I'm going to demand a shameless plug of some of your work because it's a free thing. And I know you'll be too coy to mention it, but it's really good and really useful. So I'm going to ask you the question, then you can pretend that it wasn't a complete straight layup. For security leaders listening, it is important you check your teams are actually kind of scrubbing up on how to protect AI, not just worry about AI's use in cybersecurity offensively and defensively. Can't just kind of roll it out and hope. So Rob, tell me about protecting AI in the enterprise and kind of top things people should be paying attention to and where they might find more help.
Hey, thank you for that because it ties directly into my last point. It's like, how can organizations feel safe in doing this? So first of all, you end up having two types of it. Your own implementations, utilizing AI models, your own data sets, your own proprietary data, and using third-party capabilities. Both of these need to be evaluated because organizations are being asked to implement them. In the past, cloud technologies, you could evaluate it maybe over about, a month or two to be able to say which one should we use. Decisions are now being made in days. We end up having DeepSeek, the model, open source, released. And within days, you see the major cloud-based service providers that are offering AI models to their customers implement DeepSeek like there was no true auditing that was going on with this. What your point is, and the shameless plug, / things that we've been working on at SANS, is we've developed a critical AI cybersecurity guide that will walk a leader through the key questions that they need to be asking their team. For example, critical controls might say, hey, we need multi-factor authentication. We don't specifically say which MFA needs to be used. We just say, hey, you need to ask the question, hey, do we have MFA enabled?
That's massively functional AI, right? So that MFA.
Yeah. Well, when it comes down to when we end up talking specifically about AI, that's the kind of question tying it back to specifically the types of controls a leader might be asking traditionally today. How do you potentially leverage this in your own guides? There are 6 principles that we are recommending that leaders ask their teams before they turn on that capability. And this is crucial for most organizations. They don't know the right questions to ask. This will give them the ability for leaders to ask questions to their technical teams. Are we considering that? They may not have the full answers to that yet, but they potentially put it on the radar. It says, we need this in place before we fully implement our capabilities inside this new technology we've never seen before.
Well, Rob, this is absolutely fascinating. And you just talked a lot about time. But I'm afraid, thanks to our indiscipline, we're running out of it.
Oh, Ciaran, time is but a concept, or at least some, vague dimension in some kind of multi-dimensional interpretation of space and time. It's not a big deal.
Well, I suppose I accept your challenge, because certainly in the podcast world, time is limitless.
Okay, no, back to your plan. Let's continue.
All right. Okay, I can't resist asking you one more question. I mean, I'm absolutely exhausted, so this has been absolutely fascinating. It's been educative. It's been scary and reassuring, but energizing, because it's only reassuring if we get it right. So I'd like you to paint us a picture. And I know this is really difficult. And yes, we are recording this, so it will be available in 5 years' time. But just paint us a picture of where you think, if you're asked by, a C-suite executive, said, look, what's this going to be like in the world of cybersecurity and AI in 5 to 10 years' time? What would you say to them about how things are going to be different and how they're going to have to adapt in order to prosper?
Oh my goodness. Great question. I'll answer it like this. I think you and I specifically, I don't think James, I have to go back and look exactly how old he is, but it doesn't matter. I think you and I remember a point in time that
time is but a concept.
Well, we need fruity drinks on this one.
James is newer to this concept than you and me, Rob. I think we can put it that way.
I have experienced less time.
Yes. Anyway.
We remember a time that was pre-internet.
Oh, yes.
Like we actually had to figure out how to meet up with our friends, going to a movie theater. There's the before and afters. And in fact, we have generations.
I'm not that young, Rob. Jeez.
I mean, I don't even know if you remember. You probably did because you're one of those babies that, definitely was like telepathic at that point.
He was born with a ZX81 in his hand.
A fine device. Sorry, Rob, continue your point. I'll shut up.
I think 5 years from now, we're not going to remember any of the economics, any of the leaders who are in charge at this point, making decisions, any of the conflicts going on. It's going to come back to one thing. It's like, oh, that was that time frame that AI really took over. And that's actually a really bad analogy. That really became part of our day-to-day lives. I meant to say took over our day-to-day lives, but really started to be this, blur of time. But because the internet took a little bit longer time, this is going to be a very, very short period of time that we'll remember the before and after. And I can't predict exactly the way AI is going to be looking, whether it could be robots running around, doing the plumbing, like you mentioned, or we're all sitting on the beach and having fruity drinks debating whether or not AI is still a good thing and causing brain rot.
Yeah.
But it comes down to, I think in 5 years, we're going to look back and say, wow, that was the transformational time frame. And I'll say, who was the president? And everyone will pause for a second. Oh, yeah, I think that was X, That is what's going to happen. We'll remember this time because of what AI is. And this is going to be that time period everyone will look back to and saying the before and after.
What an astonishing way to think about it. And maybe we'll adapt the robot plumber test to the robot beach waiter test. Will it be able to bring us those drinks to our rotting brains? Or will it, as currently is the case with plumbing, will it accidentally tip it over our heads and smash the glass? Who knows? But we've covered so much. That was an absolute tour de force, Rob. Thank you. We do, however, sadly, have to bring it to a close.
Yes, but Ciaran, don't
God,
forget.
here we go.
Get over yourself. It's my thing. We're 2 seasons down, working into 3. So it's established. As you know, folks, it's only fair when we ask everyone to kind of listen to us meandering through the welcoming of the future AI evil overlords.
To be fair, Rob was quite good. It was just us.
He was. In fairness, your hosts have let you down horribly today. The guest was very disciplined.
He was excellent.
But look, we would like to try to give you something useful at the end. And per the rest of the podcast, it's going to fall on Rob to do it.
Yes. So, Rob, we are asking you for
your 30-second takeaway. So, Rob, look, this podcast is about lessons for cybersecurity leaders. You've given them lots to think about already, from the near term to kind of stargazing 5 to 10 years into the future. If you had just 30 seconds with a security leader at the moment, what would you advise them about the best things they can do to protect themselves in this, current crazy automated, artificially intelligenced world of ours? Oh, that was hard to say. What would be your kind of 30-second advice of what to pay attention to, ignore, or whatever else occurs to you?
All right, 2 things. Number 1, you as a security leader are going to be asked by organizations, C-suite executives, how are we deploying and utilizing AI in a safe way? So download the SANS AI critical controls, look at them, pass them to your team and saying, are we following these? And these controls are going to be updated frequently. We have another release that is going on, every 3 or 4 months. So take a look for that. Number 2, when it comes to security and securing your environment, utilizing enhanced superpowered AI human beings, that is where look for new capabilities, encourage your teams to test things out and create their own solutions, but also take a look at how you would be able to employ these, swarming your network with defensive capabilities. Look for those edge advantages that you're able to take advantage of today, and look for what vendors and solution providers are going to be able to provide tomorrow. You also need to make sure your team is trained. And as a result of that, you cannot just rely on AI agents to say, hey, I can now replace my workforce. The creative and problem-solving capabilities of the humans driving this technology is always going to be key. Number 1, download the controls, follow them. Number 2, look for advantages that AI is going to be able to provide your security suite of humans and capabilities.
I think that's just wonderful advice, Rob. And it really plays to how I'm thinking about this stuff too. Look, if we're all going to have AI, good, bad, and ugly, the edge is human. and educating yourself, learning more about the sharing practices with others, looking at the controls you mentioned. That's great ways to increase your edge versus kind of depending on AI. Wonderful stuff. Hey, Ciaran, I think I saved the episode with a tiny bit of help from Rob, just a tiny bit.
Yes, conspicuous by his absence in your thank yous is me. I tried to ruin it. So please, we now have to ask you for feedback. Be gentle on me. But thank you so much, Rob. I think I need a bit of a lie down now, possibly a drink served by a robot. But you can leave us feedback at the podcast site, or you can email us at cyberleaderspodcast@sans.org. Tell us what you'd like to hear more or less of, anything you like.
Fruity drinks on the
beach. So get yourself a fruity drink and enjoy it. You earned it after listening to this episode. So thank you for that.
And thank you for listening. Keep cybering. And from me, Ciaran Martin.
And me, James Line.
It's goodbye.
And kill -9.